Good morning, folks. How's it going? As usual, I'm on my way to work, so we're going to have a little chat. It is Thursday. I think it's probably about the 16th of June. I get a little fuzzy. All the days run together because I am very busy. So I'm going to give you some of the information that you're not likely to hear in your daily news and daily updates of this, that, and the other. So what is happening? Well, it was an interesting news blurb come out yesterday that the United Kingdom has directed Zelensky and the Ukrainians to handle the exchange of their two citizens, two mercenaries who served in the Ukrainian armed forces who were captured, and they're currently under a death sentence in the Donetsk People's Republic. They have two United Kingdom citizens and one Moroccan citizen. The Brits want their guys back, but they're not going to officially do it. They've directed the Ukrainians to do it, and there seems to be a little bit of reluctance on the side of the Ukrainians to take care of this situation. The president of the DPR basically came out this morning and said, hey, nobody's contacted us. These guys are waiting on an appeal period. He says, I've already reviewed the case, and unless they have new information, we're not going to commute their death sentences. And the window's rapidly closing for the appeal. So it's interesting. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of action going on. Honestly, I'd love to see what they really had on these guys. I know at least one of the fighters was there for several years before the invasion. He was part of the Ukrainian forces that were making war on the citizens of Donetsk. So for me, it'd be interesting just to see what they have on this. I do know it, before he was a mortarman, he operated a cord ordnance rifle or heavy machine gun, big 14.7 beast. Makes a mess out of anything it hits. I'd really love to see what they had on these guys, see if they really had anything or whether this is a show trial. The West is always going to say it's a show trial. They're always going to say, well, we absolutely, positively had proof. Well, the truth is somewhere in between. I'd love to see what you had on these guys and see if there's any validity to it, or is the Western media perhaps right that it was a show trial? We just don't know. Now, if you have a propensity to believe everything you see in the Western media, let me tell you, I'm finding it surprising you're still alive, because obviously if you've not wore a mask or got vaccinated, you were obviously already dead from COVID. And, a little aside, as many people who've been vaccinated have got COVID, it's still a surprise you're alive if you believe everything that is reported in the Western media. But if you come out and you say anything against COVID, you must be silenced. You're spreading misinformation and you must shut the hell up. And they will shut you up. So we're in a similar situation here. If you believe everything the media tells you, woe on to you, because I'm not sure that you can be helped. So that's interesting. The other interesting narrative that's developing is in Europe and also in the United States. There is this narrative, hey, maybe the Ukrainians might want to go to the negotiating table and figure out what they're going to give up for peace. Now, just a few weeks ago, Henry Kissinger, a guy who's been involved in politics since I was a kid, which means he's really, really old, came out and said basically the same thing. And for his trouble, he was put on an official enemies list of Ukraine. Yes, Henry Kissinger in his 90s is an enemy of Ukraine now. Well, I wonder how many more people are going to be added to that list. Because even Joe Biden said, hey, I can't tell them what they're to do, but it would seem to me they're going to have to sit down and talk with the Russians and decide just what they're going to concede, what they're going to give up. But we're still sending in tons and tons of ammunition, tons and tons of weapons. But that's okay, because the Ukrainians want more. Yes, they have managed to blow through the stocks of their old Soviet weaponry. Yep, they ran through their artillery rounds. They're running through rifle ammunition, which seems to be the funniest thing, because I remember just a few months ago, seemed like they were dumping out AKs on the streets of Kiev along with ammunition and say, here, go defend your Ukrainian homeland. Go do it. Pick up the weapon. And yet now troops at the front can't seem to get ammunition. We keep hearing these horror story reports that some Ukrainian soldiers and foreign fighters are only getting 10 rounds for their AK. 10 rounds for an AK is like if you're a super heavy obese individual and you love food, getting the fun size candy bar. It doesn't do anything but aggravate you. It's useless. 10 rounds is the fun size candy bar of the AK world or the assault rifle world. So I will tell you, they aren't getting dick to their troops. Now, their logistics seem to be horrible. They're only saying that they're only firing about 5,000 rounds of artillery a day. That's how much they're allotted. Now, there were reports saying that the Russians were firing 500,000 rounds a day. Seems a little excessive, seems a little high. There was a report, which I tend to go with a little more easily, that's saying that they were firing 50 to 60,000 rounds, which is 10 times the amount of ammunition the Ukrainians are using. It still shows us that, generally if you know math, you know who shows up to the fight with most wins. And the logistics on the Russian end seem to be superior. Those guys are getting haircuts. Those guys are getting their laundry done. Those guys are getting fresh baked bread. Yes, they have baking units, actual baking ovens on carts that follow the army. Bread is a big deal to them. It is a big part of their culture. Pardon me. And it's also, a staple of their diet. In fact, I'm not so sure that these bakeries aren't what were easily mistaken for mobile crematoriums, which goes to talk to another bullshit article that appeared early about the Russians have mobile crematoriums. They're hiding their dead. Well, if they really had these mobile crematoriums, don't you think they would have burnt the bodies that they supposedly killed in Bucha? The bodies that were actually killed by Ukrainian artillery that shelled the city after the Russians had already left. But no, there are no burnt bodies. There were plenty of bodies laying. So, you've got two conflicting deals. Well, the Russians have mobile crematoriums, but they also left a bunch of dead civilians for everyone to find. So somewhere in there, there's a lie. You need to find the lie. The cluster munitions used on them, the little darts and everything, are consistent with the cluster munitions that the Ukrainians are known to use. In fact, they're still using cluster munitions against Donetsk. I don't know if you've heard about that in the news. They have been absolutely shelling and rocketing the daylights out of the city of Donetsk. No military there. It's all civilians. But let me tell you what, they're laying waste to it. And unlike the Ukrainian military, the DPR does not hide their weapons, does not hide their artillery in cities amongst the civilian population. And it was interesting, the Ukrainians also slipped up this week, and they said, hey, we the only way we can survive is to hide our stuff in the cities amongst the population. Well, guess what happens? Number one, that's against the law of land warfare. It's technically a war crime. It's against the Geneva Convention to do that, but we won't call them out on that. Nobody will call them out on that. And when you hide your artillery next to an apartment building, school, or hospital, you've negated that hospital or school's protective status. And then guess what happens next? That's right. You get blowed up. The hospital or school gets blowed up, and then you get to blame the other side, saying, look at them, they're targeting hospitals, they're targeting schools. No, they're targeting your artillery and tanks that you decided to park next to your schools and next to your hospitals. And there are plenty of video of that from the early days. Parking Grad batteries right next to a hospital, parking their armored personnel carriers and tanks next to apartment blocks, civilians coming out and bitching. There's one where the director of a school comes out and starts bitching at a Ukrainian artillery officer of why he has posted his guns and mortars in their schoolyard, knowing the counter battery fire is going to take out her school. You know, these things don't get reported in the press. We don't talk about it, but that's okay, because apparently we're all out of ammunition for those guns. We're all out of ammunition for all the old equipment we used to have. That's right, folks. We got nothing. We have all weapons with no ammunition to fire them. That's right, no ammunition. In fact, not only are the Russians winning the logistics war, but now most of the stuff the Ukrainians had has been rendered useless because they are out of ammunition. So now they need a bunch of American and NATO weaponry and the ammunition to fit it. Now, I don't know if any of you guys were ever in the military. I don't know if any of you guys ever picked up a mortar round or an artillery round or a tank round. The ammunition is heavy. It takes a lot of effort and fuel, especially when you're going to put it on an aircraft in the United States or in Europe, and then transport it to Germany, or Poland, and then take it across the border. That is going to take a great amount of fuel, and that's really going to help the energy crisis, is it not? That we are going to basically waste a bunch of fuel moving a bunch of ammunition for no real good reason other than the Ukrainians have ran out. Now, that also brings me to another question. I know that the Bulgarians and the Czechs made a lot of ammunition. Their factories, unlike Ukrainian factories, are still standing. Well, why don't these other NATO countries start producing ammunition for the Ukrainian army? The 30 millimeter rounds for the AGS-17, most of those right now are coming from Bulgaria, or their old Bulgarian stocks. It seems to me that the tooling has probably remained the same, and the Bulgarians probably could start producing this ammunition again. And that would be a big help. That would, you know, and it's a shorter trip from Bulgaria to Ukraine than it is from an army depot in the United States to Ukraine. And don't forget, we have to supply a weapon and ammunition. Those folks, you know, the stuff we send is going to have to be, you know, those folks, excuse me, the folks in Bulgaria, all they got to do is provide ammunition. The weapons are already there, except for the ones the Russians have destroyed. So we have all that going on. We've got logistical failures. We've got Ukrainians without ammunition for their weapons, so they need new weapons. You're not going to hear all this stuff. You're not going to hear all this stuff. You're not going to hear about Donetsk being shelled relentlessly, these civilian positions. You're not going to hear about all the other nonsense. And to top it all off, a lot of folks in the West are now predicting a coup against Zelensky coming from inside his own military. And that's not Russian wishful thinking. That is Western pundits saying that they think it's possible. The military isn't happy with Zelensky. They're not happy with the way he's squandering troops. Zelensky's tactics right now, and I know you're going to get tired of hearing this, is Germany 1945. We aren't going to surrender anything. Troops are not allowed to pull back. Troops must fight to the death to defend their homeland, yada, yada, yada. So for your trouble, you get a lot more dead Ukrainians, and you get no results, and you get a country that's on the brink of collapse. Well, folks, that's all I got time for today. I'll get back with you later with another update as the situation dictates. I know that There are several mini cauldrons now in Donetsk. I will tell you, once these areas start to crack and start to fold, I think it's going to be a cascading effect, and a lot of these cauldrons are just going to dissipate immediately. Guys are going to surrender. Guys are just going to throw down their arms and say, hey, I've had enough, take me into captivity. And that's another thing. Ukrainians are actually petitioning the Russians not to release their family members. They would rather have them stay in Russian captivity than be returned to the front, where they're probably going to be killed. They're lucky enough to be in captivity of either the Russians, the DPR, or the LNR, and they don't want their family members coming back to the field and being put back in by the Ukrainian government to die. They don't want that to happen. All right, folks, y'all take care. I'll talk at you later. Bye.